Hi Magdalena,
Hello.
welcome to the East of Moon office.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. We want to take some time to talk about the project that we are working together on with a few other people, fostering innovation ecosystems in rural Iceland. How do you think it's going?
I like how it's going. I mean, we just had our big meeting with the whole project team so far, and I think we just start to walk the path, don't we?
Yeah.
I still think we are like talking about the basics. We have to define our project before we really know what to do. But I think this is exactly the exciting thing also.
Yeah. What made you interested in this project to begin with?
I'm interested in innovation. I'm interested in rural areas. I'm interested in the things that you do. So I guess that's enough.
Yeah, you had been working in regional development in Bavaria, and you had been living in the south of Iceland, and you're doing your PhD related to innovation in rural Iceland. So it was great to be able to get you on board of this project. You're kind of taking on some research packages, but your research often takes you into actions as well. You described yourself as a researcher and a doer.
Yeah, actually it was you who brought this up and I thought this was so fitting, so I just took it over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about what you've been doing as opposed to researching in the last few months.
Also the funny thing now that you say this again with researcher and doer, like the methodology I'm applying is action research in my PhD.
Okay.
So this is kind of that the researcher is involved actively and then analyzing it whilst doing it.
Okay.
So I think this fits perfectly.
How are you being actively involved in what you're researching?
I'm involved in this project with 2 research packages, 2 field studies, and one of them is called Entrepreneurial Dynamics, Digital Innovation in Rural Iceland, and the other one is the field study about hacking Hekla, and there I'm the action researcher. I am developing a hackathon amongst other people in a team, and I'm analyzing it and writing about it. So this is where I'm a researcher and an active person.
How has the hackathon been going so far?
I think it's been going good, but of course I'm talking from my perspective as a project developer in this sense. But I think it's been going good, and also I think we get a lot of positive feedback, and also the fact that people want to work with us. Now we're having Hacking Österland coming up. I think this shows us that people are interested in our work, so I'm happy.
Can you tell us a little bit about the kind of stuff that you found out so far about innovation in rural Iceland?
I mean, it's when I started this with Hacking Hekla, I just thought I'm gonna change the world with everything, because there hasn't been like a label, like a rural hackathon so far. So I thought, okay, I come up with something the world has been waiting for, but it wasn't like that. It was more like, it's a small thing, it's a small sparkle, like a seed, and maybe it grows, maybe not. And I would have expected a tree to be there 2 months later, but it wasn't. So in my paper, I compared this with volcanic eruptions, which we also have at the moment in Iceland, because innovation is such a buzzword. And me too, everybody thinks that innovation leads to a volcanic eruption, to something that's sparkling and loud and visible and just great and changing everything, like the volcanic eruption does at the moment in Iceland, it's shaping the landscape. But Hacking Hekla was more like a small shaking. I don't even know if it was a shaking yet. Maybe it will lead to more shakings, maybe it will lead to an eruption, but I think this is a process. This is not something that kind of explodes and then it is there. It's something that builds up, and more volcanic seismic activity comes, and maybe it eventually leads to an eruption, and maybe not. We have to wait.
Yeah, innovation systems and communities. I was reading about how they are often described as complex systems. So you can't really understand exactly how they move. You know, you can influence some parts of it, and you can push here and push there, and you can do stuff, but you can't really engineer it or make it behave in certain ways.
No, that's actually a nice term, complex systems, because also I think it's so depending on the stories. Like everybody who is part of this process takes part because of different reasons. Like maybe everybody has this goal, I want regional or rural innovation, but everybody's coming from a different angle, and rural innovation doesn't mean the same for everybody. So it's kind of a collection of stories.
Right, so so everybody coming at it from a different angle. But what are some of the different angles that you find that people come at it with? Like, what are the different stories that people are telling? You know, have you found in your research?
I mean, just in the beginning, of course, I just analyzed Taking Suðurland, and now the others follow. But there's one pattern that always repeats itself, and it's just the heart for rurality. And this is mostly by people that...
The what?
A heart for rurality, like love for the...
A heart for rurality, yeah.
Like people that have families there or have been growing up in the countryside, they feel like that this discussion that innovation is only happening in urban areas, they don't feel good about this. They don't like that people talk down to rural areas as less innovative or like maybe not such a far developed mindset. They want to actively bring innovation to the countryside because of own stories or experiences they had there.
Do you think that innovators in rural areas are motivated by different things than innovators in urban areas? Because you mentioned heart for rurality, so I wonder if they are motivated by feelings towards their own community in what they want to do in a bigger part than innovators in urban areas.
That's a good question, actually. I think it's interesting that like innovation in urban areas is never a big topic. It's just happening, but it's not necessarily called innovation. It's just projects.
Well, innovation in urban areas is just innovation.
Exactly.
So when people talk about innovation, they mean innovation in urban areas.
Exactly.
So there was a book, the first main accelerator in Iceland was called Startup Reykjavík, for example, and there's a very city-focused sort of narrative about innovation.
Yeah, it's also kind of so normal that innovation starts in urban areas and then it has to be brought to the countryside like a blueprint, but I don't think this really works.
Right, so that innovation is kind of more advanced in the urban and then the rural can catch up with it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think this is what bugs the people that say like we have a heart for the countryside, because they don't feel that the countryside has to pick up. It has its own dynamic, which maybe takes some parts from the urban areas, which you said, like an ecosystem which cannot live if the urban part is missing, but also the urban part needs the rural part. Yeah, but to answer your question, like if rural innovators are different to urbans, I think this is so hard to say. I don't have an answer yet.
Well, I have been thinking about, we started our project, which is funded by something called the Strategic Research and Development Project, or markaáætlun til samfélagslegra áskorana, something like that. So it's talking about the fund that is providing our funding talks about social challenges. So our starting point is the challenges. So our starting point was observing how innovation in rural areas measured in the terms of funding or measured in terms of tax deductions and all these kind of external metrics that we have to look at innovation, how it's a lot less in rural areas, in the countryside. But we have also been discussing how this, might be how starting from the point of view of a problem and how like the rural has to catch up with the urban, how that's also kind of dangerous and kind of a trap, because it goes into this catching up and becoming as good as.
Or comparison, yeah.
And comparison, rather than sort of carving its own path and becoming its own thing and doing it on your own terms.
Yeah, that's true, but I think this is it's so hard. Like I had some conversations with like rural entrepreneurs, and you mentioned the grants and the grant applications are being less in the countryside than compared to urban areas. But I talked to many successful entrepreneurs, and they just said, you know, it just happened. I didn't need a grant. It kind of feels like a grant would be like the last solution they would ever think about.
Right, but then we also go into this question of entrepreneurship and innovation, because the kind of grants we are talking about, like the Technology Development Fund or the tax breaks for innovation, they are not given out for a tourist company unless they are working on something highly innovative, you know. So we also go back to something that we've been discussing is like how do we define innovation and also how do we measure it?
Exactly, this was what I just wanted to say, like when I thought about our seminar we had with the project team recently, like what is innovation? I think it's like the problem is that we are working with buzzwords, and some people, or like in the global discussion, it's not clear what it means, I think.
Well, we came up with a lot of definitions.
We came up with it, yes, but I think it's so hard to define. Like also I feel this in my interviews with the entrepreneurs when I say, can you describe or paint or draw or whatever or sing what is innovation for you? Then people always have to ask, like, what do you exactly mean with innovation? So it's out there, the word, it's like used all the time, but it's unclear what it is.
But I mean, when we looked at some of the definitions that international organizations have or academics and stuff, there were quite clear things in common. So it was creating value in a new way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some people want to do it in like a strictly products and services and strictly in kind of a business sense, and others look at it more broadly, you know, so whatever way to create economic value, whether it's within the public sector or NGOs or whatever. But generally speaking, it's something that's valuable and being applied practically and is new. And usually there's kind of a lot of research and development that goes into it. And maybe the discussion that we have with, you know, one thing I've thought a lot about is how innovation in the countryside and the rural areas is always linked with jobs creation. And I think that there is this idea that the countryside needs more jobs, because back in the old days you had to have jobs for people to move somewhere. Although it's kind of turned around now, and it's more, you know, people are more looking at it from the model of people are moving somewhere and there are jobs being created because of that. Yeah. But people are still a bit stuck in this needing more jobs to get more people because we have population decline. Yeah. And so then they see innovation as being creation of jobs. In an urban setting, you very rarely hear about innovation because we need to create more jobs. Yeah, it's like in urban areas, it's more like a self-fulfilling tool, which also should be in the countryside, I think. Yeah. I mean, I do wonder if this definition of innovation is kind of unhelpful because it focuses on, you know, the essence of innovation is to find new ways to create value. And usually those are like having less people do something or doing something more efficiently. Something meaningful that's not necessarily dragging in people, like more people, you mean? Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when you start out with a premise of creating a lot of jobs, what kind of activities do you do? I mean, they're not, most innovative companies and tech companies are finding ways to do something more with less people. You know, that's what we call economic value. That's how economic value is created. I think this also kind of scares people off because I think like in the common sense people are still scared that innovation might take jobs away. I think this is still kind of in the heads in the people in the countryside. Like you said, they need more companies. But innovation is absolutely taking jobs away. But it can also create. It can also create, yeah. And I mean, we see that there are a lot less people working in the fish factories now, or the trawlers. I mean, there's a lot fewer hands that you need to process fish.
Exactly.
And this has contributed to the decline of many villages. The question is, can you stop that process, or do you need to be part of it yourself? Do you need to create your own jobs, I suppose, you know?
I think it's definitely part of it, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There's so many ideas out there. Just I'm lacking the words at the moment, but I think it's like, let's say you live in a rural community, you have ideas. I mean, I know this also. I was born and raised in a small community in rural Germany, and there's always people complaining about things that could be easily solved if they just did it, but they don't. And I think if you had some tools to actually do something yourself, you could actually solve your problem that you are always addressing and always complaining about. This is also innovation.
What kind of tools would that be? What if you look back at when you were growing up in a small town in southern Germany? What tools were you missing to do something yourself?
I mean, this started with super basic things. Let's say the bridge is ugly, and people were constantly complaining how ugly the bridge is, instead of just like calling the whole village and saying, "Hi, I have a bucket full of paint, let's paint this bridge." But no 10 years of complaining instead of just like initiating something. And I think this is the same in a broader scale. You just need a platform where you can mobilize people. And I think this is the beginning of innovation for me.
So you feel like in these kind of communities particularly, there's a lack of these kind of platforms? Yeah.
I think so, because everybody has ideas. It's just so hard. So it's so easy to stop when you have an idea and not take it further. It's so easy to sit on your ideas. And I think this is what hinders innovation so much.
That's interesting.
Do you agree?
I don't know. Because I'm not sure if you know, if for example the example you put about the bridge, you know, would it have been different in a city? I'm not sure.
I mean, the city management would have taken care of this, but in a small village, everything is kind of depending on the few hundred people that are living there. So the government maybe comes every 30 years to do something. But if people want it more nicer or better or more innovative, if you want to use this word, they have to do something themselves. This is of course just a super basic example, but just, you know, like action is hampered because of people not forming networks or talking about things.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about the project that we're doing more. So what are the next steps in what we're doing?
I mean, we just had a meeting the day before yesterday that we want to organize a workshop, which I think is very cool, because at least that's what we are saying. One of our missions is to bring this discussion about fostering rural innovation out there. We want to spread the word, and for that we need people helping us to share. So I would say this is our next step, to organize a nice workshop, to have a discussion, to bring in our thoughts, but also hearing stories from other actors.
What are you hoping to get out of that this project will achieve, or what will come out of this project? You know, what are your hopes for it?
You mean like from the workshop, or?
From the project in general, this 2 years project.
That's a big question. It's a very big one. I think it's because for now we are, like I said before, we are playing so much with these buzzwords: innovation, digitalization. Like everybody is kind of innovative and everybody is digital, but also not. And I think like it would be a kind of big goal, but I would like to map Iceland, to know, like, if you want to have access to the innovation scene, whatever this is, we have to define it. I think, like, you know where to go. You know what kind of innovation, you can click on different things of innovation, what's your part of interest, you know whom to talk to and what is out there.
So kind of a connection and a clarity within innovation in rural places.
Yeah, and also what is actually, like, what is part of this innovation and what different, like, under sections are there. Whom do I approach if I want to be innovative? More like this.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I do agree that there is a lot of buzzwords. I don't think that innovation is so hard to define, personally.
No, it's not.
But I do think that, yes, it's a word that is being very much used. And there is a danger that it loses its meaning. So all companies want to be innovative. All municipalities want to be innovative. All political parties want innovation. So once you've got this broad consensus about some one thing that everybody's talking about, it becomes dangerous.
It does.
Because people are just talking in one direction. And I think there is so much of a discussion to be had about, is innovation always good?
Good question.
Yeah, what if what you're innovating is harming something or some communities? What if it's changing the balance of people's lives? What if it's collecting data about all of us and shifting the power into the hands of a few companies? That's also innovation.
It's a good question.
Yeah, and is innovation, what is the objective of innovation? We talked about value being created, but is that always the same as economic growth?
I don't think so.
Me neither, but I think a lot of the discussion is assuming this. So, maybe we need, we also have a discussion about, so in the countryside, innovation is supposed to create jobs, which I think is a dangerous premise.
Yeah, maybe also a bit old school.
A bit old school as well. In the capital, innovation is usually for the economy to grow. But we don't talk so much about which direction it should grow to,
or for what and why.
And for whom, So I think there's a lot of critical questions that need to be asked about innovation.
And also the stigma that is on innovation. I think also, especially in the regional development plans, it's used often in connection with digitalization. I feel this a lot in my interviews when I ask the rural entrepreneurs I'm talking to, and I say, can you give me an example how you are very innovative, especially now in these times of COVID? What do you mean? And I say, okay, what did you change to react to the COVID-19 crisis? Oh, and then all these cool ideas came.
Yeah.
Really cool ideas, but people are changing the whole concept just to react on the things and make a little bit of money and not lose their company. But if I ask about innovation, I mostly don't get any ideas.
Sure. Well, one thing is interesting, which is that technology has become synonymous with digital. But there it is also interesting to dive into the definitions of technology. And I think one of the definitions that we found was applying knowledge for human work, applying new knowledge for human work. And then you realize, it doesn't have to be on computers.
No, but this is what everybody thinks.
Sure.
This is tricky, I think, to work with these words when there's a common misunderstanding even. Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to sort out and clarify, and I think one thing is clear, at least to me, that innovation and technology, whether it's digital or otherwise, it is something that's really, it is affecting our lives and it is affecting the world. It's affecting questions of urban and rural trajectories, and it's really important to understand, take part in, and put at the service of the values that we want.
Yes, exactly. I think also what you are saying, I think for now we are maybe at the stage of our project where we have concepts and they are still empty, and I think what we have to do in these 2 years, we have to fill them with stories. We have to listen to many, many stories, I think.
Absolutely. And create other stories even.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. Well, thank you for this chat.
Thank you too.
And thanks for popping by at East of Moon.
Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to that workshop later in the summer.
Me too, man. A lot.
Okay.